So a couple of days ago I filmed a video about my sexual assault story. More so about the ways that it has affected me, and I kind of wanted to make this a two-part series. So today's video is going to be about my healing process. But yes, I have been crying. I don't know why. I ate some mac and cheese, some vegan mac and cheese, and then I just started crying and it felt really good. So now I'm gonna go cry some more while I make this video. It definitely started with acceptance. The first part of my healing process was centered around accepting what had happened to me and accepting it as true. And because the process is kind of not linear, I'm going to be jumping to and from a little bit. When I was 7, I was assaulted, and I didn't really know anything about what had happened until I was around 14. Didn't expect to be crying so much within the first few minutes. That's okay though. So, you know, it was around when we were having sex ed in schools that I kind of understood what had happened to me. And the time that it really solidified in my being was probably when I was, again, 14, and I went on a trip with a friend of mine and her family, telling me about her experience being assaulted, you know, when she was young. And like, I was hearing her talk about how he had, you know, forced her to do fellatio. I just don't like saying blowjob, I just don't like saying it. So it was kind of hearing her talk about her experience that really made me realize what had happened to me. That was the first time actually that I revisited it as a real event, because before that, in my psyche and in my mind, it wasn't a real event. It was this weird intrusive thought, and it kept making up stories, and I just don't know where it's coming from, because I don't know if it was real or not. But that was kind of the first point in my life where I actually thought, oh, this might been real. I hold a lot of love for my past self. Like, I really just want to hold her, because she went through so much, so blindly, and I suppose that's why I do this, is to let whoever else know that they're not alone and they'll be okay. And I remember that same year I told one of my best friends. I don't actually remember a lot of it, but I remember just being so upset one day and just really crying, and her being like, what's wrong? And I was just like, I think something happened to me. And I can't remember her reaction or anything, but it was around that same time that I started self-harming as well. It was just too much. It was way too much for me to hold. So when I was around 14, that was my first kind of wave of depression. So I've had 2 big waves of depression in my life, and I do think that my depression is definitely linked to what's happened to me. I kind of feel like my depression is like unfelt emotions, and also a resurfacing of the numbness that I felt as a result of that. I remember it was in year 8, so it was in my 2nd year of high school, and I just felt like I felt like I was disgusting for one. I felt like no one liked me. I felt completely and utterly worthless, a bottomless pit of worthlessness. Lost and confused, and I just felt like I had so much pain. I didn't know why, and I didn't know how to navigate it. That lasted until I was honestly around 16. I started seeing a little bit more light again. And when I was around about 16 was when I actually kind of like told people, like groups of people, multiple people. I remember getting drunk for one of the first times ever. There was this like boxing bag, and like dramatic little 16-17-year-old Freya just started like punching the shit out of this boxing bag, like, because I had obviously drunk a bit and just had a lot that I just couldn't process or feel, and I was getting it out using movement. Oh, how funny is this? Because I didn't have the flip screen on, I just filmed like a whole journey and wasn't filming. What I was talking about was when I was 16, and my friend, we'll call her Ella, who's a little bit taller than me, she pulled me off and she said, what are you doing? Like, why are you being like this? What's going on? And I kind of just said to her, like, I was assaulted. When I was 7, someone assaulted me. And I explained to her the whole story. And I remember after that event, it was kind of like I was telling more people. So around about that same time, I started seeing a boy. And one day I went over to his house, got a little bit drunk, and I gave him head. And this was the first time I'd ever given anyone, this is the first time I'd ever done anything sexual. I was really nervous. So, you know, it never happened. After he'd finished, he said to me, "Where did you learn to do that?" Well, you know, like something kind of being like playful and complimenting me. And I was just like, where did I learn to do that? where did I learn to do that? And it really triggered me because I was already so anxious and I'd built it up in my head as something that I had to do to prove to myself that I could do it. But anyways, I ended up just having a breakdown with this boy, and you know, he was just holding me as I cried. So after him, I kind of told my parents, and I couldn't voice it to them, so I wrote it down in a letter. And I walked into the lounge room and I gave them the letter and I said, "I need you guys to read this." So being able to tell people was one of the biggest parts of the healing process for me, because as soon as I told people, I felt that shame, that initial layer of shame, or like I'm yucky or worthlessness, melt away. And in a way, I got validation from it, which was nice. Everyone loves a good bit of validation. But not only was I externally validated, I internally validated myself. I said, this happened to me, this happened to me. Whereas, you know, for the majority of my childhood, it was like, did this happen to me? I feel really weird and I don't know if I can blame that, and I just feel weird and yuck, it must be my fault. You know, internalizing it. But when I would say it, when I'd name it, it was actually really empowering for me to be able to tell people, to be able to speak up and speak my truth. Later on down the line, a friend of mine, when I was 18, was raped by someone she trusted. When she told me, I wasn't that close with her, but I knew in that moment that we were going to become really close and that we were going to move through it together. So it was really interesting because as she was moving through her process with it, it gave me the permission to move through my things with hers. And I just understood, like, innately everything she was saying. Moving through that with her gave me the empowerment to share about it online. And when I made my sexual assault video, I remember it took me like 2 or 3 times to film it. I knew I needed to, you know what I mean? Like, I knew innately I was intuited towards it, and I'm so glad that I did, because it was so healing for me. You know, being able to speak about what happened to me gave it a purpose. So it wasn't, you know, purposed to ruin me or to make me feel like shit anymore. It was purposed for me to move through it and to empower others to move through it too. So after I had released that video, I felt so empowered. Like, I remember immediately after I posted it, I cried. I was so scared. I was like, what is everyone going to think of me? Because I thought so badly of myself for something that was, you know, out of my control. And it ended up being such an empowering experience because, in a way, that was the tool for me to move through my shame. This happened to me, but I've got it anyways, you know, and I was very empowered through not only using my voice, but through rage. So I was still a very angry person. And I remember I would go to clubs and I would go out. This was a phase of my life where I was drinking fairly often. You know, I would go out and I'd get drunk, and if anyone tried to hit on me, if anyone looked at me the wrong way, or if anyone looked at my friends in the wrong way, I'd arc up, you know. I would literally have a go at so many different people, which I'm not very proud of, just assuming that they all wanted to rape everyone. The one thing about anger is that what's always underneath it is sadness. And for me, what was underneath my anger was a lot of grief that I was processing. I had a lot of layers of forgiveness to move through, essentially. And it took me a long time to move through those layers of forgiveness. The 4th stage of healing was after that stage of empowerment, feeling all of my unfelt feelings and feeling all of the emotions that I numbed because I couldn't face them, because I couldn't face anything. So around this time was when I was dealing with my feelings of dissociation, my lack of boundaries, my codependency, and kind of feeling all of the unfelt feelings. In my relationship and in my situations, I noticed that I was saying sorry a lot, and I think it was like my New Year's resolution to stop saying sorry so much. And it's been a journey since then, my sorries, but I noticed that I wasn't saying sorry for things that you actually had to say sorry for. I was saying sorry for like taking up space. Yeah, the feeling was definitely the hardest part of my journey because, you know, a young adult, I was feeling all of these crazy emotions that I probably felt when I was younger, but not having any awareness that they were connected to my trauma, not really knowing what I was feeling, what was going on. My depersonalization was out the wazoo. I was dissociated every single day. You know, I would wake up and feel like I was dead. I was still, you know, using drugs at the time and drinking, and that definitely wasn't helping. So yeah, the feeling was pretty gnarly. When I actually think about what has healed me, it was definitely spirituality at that time. And I can't remember it, but my therapist said this amazing thing about this dude that wrote a book that's like educated who wrote a book about trauma transforming into a spiritual experience, and that's definitely what I felt happened to me. So I was experiencing all these crazy traumatic emotions, literal PTSD, and as I was feeling all of that and experiencing all that, I started like receiving guidance. Not like there was this voice being like, Freya, I am your almighty higher self, you must meditate today. You know, it wasn't like that. It was like my intuition was so strong and so crazy. So I came on a meditation retreat, and it was around that time that I started doing yoga as well, and yoga has just been so healing for me because you can't focus on your breath, move into a pose without being present in your body. It really brought me back down to earth. And I remember after doing yoga, I'd feel a little bit more of that humanness again, rather than just feeling so dissociated and numb. Anyway, so I went on this meditation retreat, and that was again also super healing. There was still a lot that I struggled to sit with, and I remember some meditations where I would feel physically like I was going to vomit, or I could not keep my eyes closed. And I was talking to my therapist about that, and she said that's actually because a lot of people, when they experience this kind of trauma, they can't sit with it because it's too painful, it's too uncomfortable. That's when the spirituality came in, and that has been the most important and potent tool for my growth and my movement through this stuff. Absolutely. And I mean, you don't have to be super woo-woo and believe in the Pleiadians or whatever to heal from your stuff using spirituality. So yeah, that was so important for me, and that allowed me to walk with grace through them. That being said, it wasn't graceful. However, I was able to walk with grace through them. And it's given me a lot of tools to stay in love and in my heart. And when I say spirituality, I don't really have a definition for it. It's just very intuitive, very much just my own personal journey of opening my heart, and opening my mind to kind of what's underneath this, what's at the core of this, and a lot of self-inquiry. Path with self-inquiry and with my spiritual journey and journey of the self as well led me to a stage of forgiveness. Through my journeys, meditations and experiences, I came to this realization that, you know, I had a few people to forgive. I had to forgive myself for not standing up for myself. I had to forgive the relative who was in the room with me for not standing up and protecting me, and I had to forgive the boys that perpetrated me, essentially. I didn't go out on a journey to forgive. I remember it just being a necessity in my being because I felt the burden of it, and the burden of it was too much to carry, essentially. And forgiveness is not excusing someone's actions. Forgiveness is not welcoming someone back into your life, or giving someone a second chance. Sometimes forgiveness is just accepting what happened and letting it go. It was like this interesting perspective that kind of opened up a space within my psyche for the possibility that perhaps this did need to happen to me in this lifetime. You know, perhaps this is a part of my journey. I'm using this for good. You know, I'm using this awful thing that happened to me as a means to empower and help other people, and to obviously do my own healing. I realized that the entire of my life I'd held resentment for men, not just the men who assaulted me, for all men. And I kind of realized that a lot of the things I was saying, or the way I was holding myself, or how my heart wasn't allowing any openness for the love of men, you know? And I realized that, and I have done a lot of forgiveness work with men, and it's an ongoing thing because I do still get anxiety sometimes, but realizing that I was holding that resentment was kind of healing enough, because I knew as soon as I realized that I had that within me that I needed to make amends. In that same experience, I had this deep calling to talk to the relative that was in the room when I was assaulted. They were the only person I could blame, because they were the memory that I had, you know, of what happened to me. And so I had this conversation last year, and I said to them, do you remember it? Like, did this happen? And they said to me, it did happen, and I'm so sorry that I didn't do anything. And they also said to me that they were doing it to other boys too. Basically, the relative was saying that the boys that assaulted me had assaulted other people too. And I still don't have a lot of clarity on this, and as well for my relatives' privacy, I'm not going to get into it. Hearing those words was so healing for me, to be able to actually know that it happened. And also it opened up a new layer of compassion for this relative of mine that I'd held in such a negative light. Hey, so I just had a quick little break because I started feeling really ungrounded. Where I'm at now in my healing journey is gentleness, constantly meeting myself with more gentleness, deeper layers of gentleness, and gentleness onto all parts of my being. Acceptance and accountability are really big for me at the moment, allowing myself to feel everything that arises and really letting it be there, because I've noticed that in my deepest of breakdowns, which I've been experiencing recently, the first thing I want to say is sorry. First thing I want to say is like, don't listen to me, don't hold space for me, sorry for being a burden on you. And I noticed another thing that is this feeling of like guilt for feeling bad, because I'm like, I've done so much work, why aren't I better? But I am better, I'm so much better. I think what I need to perhaps ease up on is the perfectionist tendencies, because of course this is going to be a tough journey. Of course this isn't just going to go away in like one meditation, you know what I mean? And I think that gentleness is really important to me. It's been important to me for about a year now. I've been working with it, just to ease up on myself and to let myself feel like what I'm feeling. Boundaries has been really important, because boundaries are what allow me to feel safe sexually. I knew something was up when I got myself into a very sticky situation sexually with someone that I was seeing, not last year, but it was last year. It was last year. I realized that I couldn't actually say anything to them. Like, I couldn't tell them to stop, or I couldn't tell them to not slap me in the face. Like, it was pretty fucked, but I'm not going to get into it. But I set the standard for how I'm treated, and I'm very accountable and aware of when I overstep my own boundaries, and when I don't stand up to people when they treat me in a way that I don't want them to. Whereas I used to just kind of get walked over, in particular in romantic relationships, because I never had the voice to speak up for myself. It's really interesting, because I've been saying like no to sex for like the first time. And I don't mean like with anyone, because, you know, I'm very much picky and there's a whole wall to get through to get in, you know what I'm saying? But in terms of like when I'm with my like romantic partners who are already kind of like in that wall and in that zone, there was never a boundary for me to say no to them, but now there is. Allowing myself to be nurtured and held, and also allowing deeper layers of vulnerability. I've also been doing therapy, which I'm sure you guys might have seen in my other video. And that's been really interesting, because it's like I'm getting the deepest, darkest resurfacings of everything that happened to me, but I'm still in a state of love. I don't feel like this is the end of this video. I feel like I'll definitely keep making more in the future. If you guys want to see anything in particular in regards to trauma, in regards to healing, I'm all ears for your suggestions. But yeah, I feel like I'm rambling and nothing's making much sense. I think I'm gonna go now and just ground myself, and hopefully this video would have made sense. But I love you all so much and so deeply, and I want you all to know you're all so much stronger than you know, and I say that to myself as well. I love you all so much. Bye. Oh.